Good evening, all. Great. I'm Lori Keene, one of the school counselors, and here with us tonight is Sarah Drexel, and we also have Lindsay Gottfried over there. And on behalf of the whole school counseling department, we want to welcome you tonight to our financial aid program. It's so great to see you all. It's so wonderful that we're in person. Since COVID, we've been doing this over Zoom, so it's really nice, and especially with all the hiccups of the FAFSA last year and the interesting rollout this year, we're super glad that we could have our speaker, Bill, with us tonight. We've known Bill for a very long time, which is fantastic. We hope that this program will help take the mystery out of financial aid, college cost, and funding. And we hope tonight's program will help to clarify and simplify the process for you all and help create financial peace of mind. And for anyone who's interested, or if you have friends, family that could not attend, tonight is being recorded. And in a few days, at some point next week, you'll be able to find it on our school counseling website under video presentations. And we are absolutely thrilled to have Bill Smith with us. He's an expert at calculating needs, determining expected family contributions. He's also very talented in packaging, which is the process colleges use to determine how much merit and need-based to award, and the mix of gift aid, loans, and work study. He runs Scholar Fits, LLC in Portland, Maine. He says the colors up there are just spectacular if anyone is traveling north this weekend. And he works with families throughout the U.S. He earned his BA from Williams, has an MBA from Northwestern, and a certificate in college counseling from the UCLA. So let me hand over the mic without further ado, and thank you so much, Bill.
Great, thank you, Lori, and thanks everyone for coming. If anyone would like a copy of the slides, send me an email and I'll be happy to send them to you. My email is up here and I'll put it up at the end of the program as well. And we're going to cover quite a bit of stuff. We'll have some time for questions at the end, so I'd ask you to hold your questions until we're done with the formal presentation. And with that, we're going to cover a lot of material, so buckle up and we'll get started. So we're going to talk about two major things tonight: assessing where you might get aid and then deciding what you can afford. So the you in you getting aid is really the student, because aid is going to be determined by colleges based on their assessment of the student's profile in terms of eligibility for either need or merit aid. And then in order to get the aid, you want to have the student apply to colleges whose awarding approach matches the student's profile. So we'll talk about that a lot. Deciding what you can afford is really you, the parents, because in most cases it's the parents who are taking care of most of the bill. So assessing where you might get aid is a matter of understanding the student's potential eligibility for need-based aid. That's looking at things like income and assets. We'll talk about that in a lot of detail. Sometimes aid is awarded based on grades, test scores, things like that. And then depending on what your student's profile is, you want to match the profile with the way colleges award aid. Deciding what you can afford is making sure that you understand the true net cost, or the net price, of a four-year degree, the resources that you have to pay for college. That's typically savings and money that you can pay out of income. If you're going to need to borrow, you want to understand how much you're going to have to borrow, and really critically, if there's going to be borrowing involved, you want to make sure that any debt is reasonable. So when people talk about the cost of college, they tend to focus on what you might call the sticker price. So at UConn, it's $37,000 for a year. At Wheaton in Massachusetts, it's about $78,000. Northwestern in Chicago is $88,000, and NYU is about $82,000. But colleges award a significant amount of gift aid that reduces the true cost of college. So after gift aid for students who receive aid, at UConn, the cost is $22,000 a year. It's $31,000 at Wheaton, $23,000 at Northwestern, and $31,000 at NYU. But there's another wrinkle, because not everyone receives gift aid. So at UConn, 75% of the students receive gift aid, 25% of the students are paying the full price. At Northwestern, almost half of the students pay the full price, and at NYU, over 60% of the students there are paying the full price. So when you factor in the people who are paying full price with the people who are getting aid, the true net price for all students is about $26,000 at UConn, $33,000 at Wheaton, $55,000 at Northwestern, and $62,000 at NYU. So the point of all this is just to emphasize that it really doesn't matter what colleges charge. What matters is what you're going to pay. And what you're going to pay is your net price. That's the college's starting cost minus the amount of gift aid that they might offer to your student. So let's talk about the types of financial aid. There are really two major categories. One of them is gift aid. That's free money, and that truly reduces the cost of college. When the gift aid is awarded based on economic circumstances, it's typically called a grant or need-based aid. When it's based on things like grades and academic record, it's typically called merit aid or scholarships. The other category of aid is self-help. This does not reduce the cost of college, but it does help manage it. And self-help includes work-study, so a campus job that the student gets during the academic year, and loans, money you borrow to pay the bill but have to repay after college. So when you look at it like this, it's pretty clear that gift aid is what you want to focus on. Unfortunately, colleges don't always make that as easy as they should. So when colleges notify you how much financial aid your student is going to get, they do it on what's called an award letter. And this is an example of an award letter, and it shows $22,000 in financial aid. That's great. $22,000 is a lot of money. But when you break it down, it turns out that 4 of the 7 line items are gift aid, 2 of them are loans, and 1 of them is work study. So when you subtotal the different categories, it turns out that the gift aid is about $15,000, the loans are $5,500, and the work study in this case is $1,800. Now $15,000 is still a lot of money, but it's a lot less than $22,000. And there's some important information that's missing, such as what's the starting cost and what's the cost after the gift aid, the true net price. So I went online and I looked it up for this college, and it turns out that the starting cost at this college is a little under $50,000. When you subtract the $15,000 in gift aid, the net price for 1 year at this college for this student is $34,865. So keep that number in mind. We're going to come back to it at the end, but let's talk a little bit more about the types of gift aid. So we said that need-based aid is typically called a grant. It's based on family income and assets. The FAFSA is the form that you apply for gift aid on at all U.S. colleges. So that's required for all colleges for gift aid and for federal student loans. There's an additional form called the CSS profile, and that's required for college-funded aid at about 150 colleges. Now, there are over 2,000 four-year colleges in the United States, so 150 that use the CSS profile is a pretty small percentage of that. However, they tend to be the colleges that are the most well-known, and they tend to be the ones that are most generous with need-based aid. So as your student is applying to college, there's a good chance that at least one of the colleges will use the CSS profile. The other type of gift aid is merit aid or scholarships, and this is aid that's based on things like grades, test scores, class rank, and so on. And this is often awarded automatically without any additional application. So when the student applies to college, often the college is going to send them a letter and say, congratulations, we want you to come to our college, you've been admitted, and we're going to offer you $20,000 a year as a scholarship. However, you always want to make sure that you check the financial aid web pages of every college that your student is applying to make sure that you understand how to qualify for as much gift aid as possible. Because sometimes, in addition to the scholarships that come automatically, there are additional scholarships that might require additional applications. So you want to make sure that you can take advantage of all of that. So let's dive into need-based aid, because when people think about financial aid, that's usually what they're really thinking about. This is the algebra portion of the evening. Need equals COA minus EFC slash SAI. And that's the critical equation in college financial aid. I'm going to explain these terms for you in a minute. But the first thing you need to remember is that when a college determines how much need a student has, that's the maximum potential eligibility for need-based aid for that student at that college. It's not necessarily how much aid he or she is going to get, but it's the most he could get in need-based aid. So let's break down those terms. COA stands for cost of attendance. And that always includes tuition and fees, housing and meals, books and supplies, and then transportation and other miscellaneous expenses. It always includes that, so when you're looking at college costs, you want to make sure that you're comparing apples to apples. You always want to make sure you're including all of the cost and subtracting all of the gift aid. EFC stands for expected family contribution. And this is kind of a misleading term because it makes you think that that's what the family is going to pay, what they're expected to pay. It really isn't. All it really is a way of ranking students based on the economic resources that they and their parents have. So the FAFSA has actually changed the term. The FAFSA changed the term EFC to SAI, which stands for Student Aid Index. That really doesn't tell you much of anything about what it is, but at least it's not as misleading as EFC. So when you hear the term SAI, that's talking about the FAFSA. When you hear the term EFC, that's talking about the CSS profile. It's important to keep that in mind. I'm probably going to use the term EFC a lot because I've been in this business for a long time, and that's how we've talked about it forever, but that's the distinction. Critical point. College aid policies vary. So some colleges meet full need with gift aid based on their assessment of the EFC or the SAI. Other colleges meet very little need with gift aid. And so if your student has high need, you would rather find colleges that have a tendency to meet a lot of that need, and that's where you're going to get a lower price. To give you an idea about who qualifies for need, I want to show you the median household income for a family of 4 in the United States in 2022. That was $109,000. That means that half of the families of 4 in the United States had an income higher than that, and half of them had an income lower than that. And the median wealth in the United States for all families in 2021 was $167,000. That means that half of the families had more wealth than that, and half of the families had less wealth than that. And that wealth includes everything. It includes savings accounts, investment accounts, home equity, retirement accounts. So when you're thinking about who gets financial need, if you think about people who are on either end of those economic halves, it's generally going to be people in the lower half of those categories who are going to get the most need-based aid. Now, that doesn't mean if your income is higher than that that you shouldn't apply, because in some cases you might qualify for some need-based aid, but it's probably not going to be the giant packages that you might hope for. So we said that the EFC or the SAI determines eligibility for need-based aid. A lower EFC means more eligibility for aid. There are 2 formulas that are used in determining eligibility for aid. one that's based on the FAFSA and one that's based on the CSS profile, but they both use the same basic approach, which is to look at the income and assets of the parents and the student. So a couple of things to point out here. What they're doing is they're doing 4 separate calculations in the background, and then they're adding up the total of all 4 of those to come up with the total EFC or SAI. Now, for most people, income weighs much more heavily in the formula than assets do. So you can see here that once you reach a relatively low threshold of income, each additional dollar of income reduces eligibility for aid by about 47 cents. On the other hand, once you reach a relatively low threshold of assets, each additional dollar of assets reduces eligibility for aid by only about a nickel. So a lot of people think, well, I want to qualify for more need-based aid. And it's probably not going to be that fruitful. Here's why. Most people can't afford to quit their jobs for 4 years while their kids are in college. And that would be the way to reduce the portion that's coming from income. If you're reducing the portion that's coming from assets, you've got to do an awful lot to have a meaningful impact on eligibility. So for example, if you want to increase your eligibility for aid by reducing the amount of assets, you have to reduce them by $100,000 to save $5,000 of eligibility. So in both cases, it really is usually not the case that people can do an awful lot to increase their eligibility for need-based aid, with one little exception that I'll tell you about now. If you happen to have a student who has assets in his or her name, those assets are going to be assessed at 20 to 25%. So if your student has an account with $10,000 in it, that's going to reduce eligibility for aid by about $2,000 to $2,500. If you were to put those assets in the parent's name, it would reduce eligibility for aid by about $500. So it would save quite a bit. And one way to legally take advantage of a loophole to put assets in the parent's name is to take student assets and put them into a student-owned 529 account. Student-owned 529 accounts are treated as parent assets on the forms. So let's talk about the FAFSA, and I want to talk about what's the FAFSA used for. So the FAFSA is used for federal Pell Grants. Those generally are limited to the very neediest of students. So those typically go to families whose income is 30, 40, maybe 50,000. Also, many states that have state-based grants also use the FAFSA for determining eligibility for those. The FAFSA is also used for federal work study, so technically work study is a need-based program. However, once your student goes to college, even if your student doesn't qualify for federal work study, it's likely that the college will have campus jobs that will be available to the student. So think about it as kind of widely available. Another critical thing is that the FAFSA is used for eligibility for federal student loans. So everyone who's a U.S. citizen or green card holders or a few other exceptional cases can qualify for federal student loans as long as they file the FAFSA. So Bill Gates' kids can get a federal student loan by filing the FAFSA. My kids can, and so can yours. And at colleges that do not use the CSS profile, they may use the FAFSA to determine eligibility for college-funded aid. However, colleges that don't use the CSS profile tend not to be particularly generous with need-based aid. That means that they often fail to meet need. That means that there's a gap between the amount of need that the student has and the amount of aid that the college offers. So what's the CSS profile used for? That is used to award college-funded need-based grants at colleges that use the form. And those tend to be the most generous colleges. So at these colleges, the maximum amount of gift aid that you could get from the FAFSA is about $7,000 to $10,000. But the maximum need-based grant that you could possibly get from the CSS profile could be as much as $80,000 or $90,000. So there's a lot more money involved and potentially available. If there are two kids in college at the same time, the profile does make an allowance for that, which potentially can increase eligibility a bit. And you may have heard the term colleges who meet full need. Other terms that you sometimes hear are colleges that are need blind or need aware. Now, need blind colleges claim to not consider whether a student needs financial aid in making their admissions decisions. Need-aware colleges do consider whether a student has financial need, which means that at these need-aware colleges, sometimes a student who can pay the full price might have an advantage in admissions over someone who can't. So a lot of people ask the question, well, should I file the CSS profile if it hurts my students' chances for admission? This is my opinion. I think you should, because why would you want your student to go to a college that you might not be able to afford? So, and it's a very small number of colleges that are need aware. Most colleges that don't meet full need are need blind. So the vast majority of colleges are need blind. It's only a very small number of colleges that are need aware and give that advantage in admission. So let's compare the FAFSA and the CSS profile. So the FAFSA starts with adjusted gross income from your tax return, and then they also include certain additional things, items of income that are not subject to tax but do count for financial aid. And the most common of those untaxed income items are deductions that you make on your tax return for an IRA or a SEP contribution, or if you have untaxed interest or untaxed IRA distributions or pensions. The common FAFSA assets include checking and savings accounts, mutual funds, brokerage accounts, real estate other than the primary residence, so that means a second home or an investment property, family business and farm, parent-owned 529s for whom the student is a beneficiary. And when the FAFSA looks at assets, they look at the market value, so the value that you could sell them for today in an open market transaction, less the debt directly secured by that asset. So if you have an investment property that has a mortgage on it, the value that they're going to look at it is the value of the property minus the mortgage. So those are what the FAFSA looks at. How about the profile? The profile looks at everything that the FAFSA looks at and some more. So the profile starts with all of the FAFSA income, and then it adds contributions to a 401k or a 403b that are not reported on the 1040. Those are reported on a W-2. The profile is going to include those. In addition, if you have allowable tax losses, maybe you have capital losses, business losses, rental real estate losses, the profile colleges are going to add those back because they want to look at cash flow more than reported income. Profile colleges will also add untaxed Social Security and gifts that the parents or the student receive from other people, including payments that might be made for college tuition, for example, by a grandparent. The profile looks at all FAFSA assets, plus they also look at home equity in your primary residence. They look at parent 529s for which the student's siblings are beneficiaries, and they look at assets in the student's siblings' names. And like the FAFSA, they're going to look at the current market value minus any debt directly securing the asset. So there have been some pretty significant changes to the FAFSA recently. They were They became effective last year. So students who graduated from high school last year were the first ones to be affected. And I can tell you that it was kind of a nightmare. So you guys are a little lucky if you didn't have to go through that. The FAFSA used to have a discount when there were multiple siblings in college simultaneously. That has been done away with. In addition, when the FAFSA is looking at the parent's income, there's a change to which parent they look at when the parents are divorced. So when the parents are divorced, it used to be that the FAFSA would look at the parent with whom the student lived, and if that parent had remarried, the new spouse. Now the FAFSA looks at the parent who provides the greater portion of the student's financial support, and if that parent has remarried, the new spouse. The changes to the FAFSA really benefited students at the very lower end of the economic spectrum. So very needy students benefited. About 500,000 students qualified or became eligible for the Pell Grant, more than had been previously. And overall, about 3/4 of all FAFSA filers had a lower SAI using the new rules, so they tended to qualify for more aid based on the FAFSA. So there are some.
Can you just clarify on the divorced parents?
I'll talk about divorced parents a little bit more in a minute. So, in fact, right now. So with divorced parents, remember the FAFSA is going to look at the parent who provides the greater amount of the student support, and if that parent has remarried, they will look at the new spouse, okay? The profile looks at both biological parents, regardless of who provides the greater amount of support, and they will also look at the new spouses. So the profile might be looking at the income and assets of as many as 4 different parents. Now, they do have a formula that is intended to put the primary burden on the biological parents, but that formula is imperfect, and it can often be disadvantageous for parents to remarry in terms of financial aid. So marry for love, don't marry for financial aid. This support standard was intended to make it less easy for people to shop for which parent was going to be the better parent on the FAFSA. Parents used to say, okay, well, the student lives more than half the time with the lower income parent. And the support standard was supposed to make that less shoppable. But it still has some gray areas because in many cases, divorced parents share the costs equally. If there's child support involved, then they're usually going to consider the person paying the child support to be providing a greater portion of support. But this is a gray area, and if you have questions, what you want to do is to make kind of a table or a spreadsheet and just add up all the costs. You can include things like food and common expenses in the shared home and that kind of thing. The key thing that you want to have, and this really applies to anything when there's a question about how you're applying to financial aid, is a story that you can tell to the college financial aid officer that makes sense, that's plausible, that passes the straight face test. So when you fill out the FAFSA and the profile, you are filling it out using income that was earned in the past. And sometimes there are special circumstances that happen after the year that they're asking questions about. So what you do in that case is you fill in the information as it is being asked for, and then if there's something you need to explain, maybe there's been a loss of a job, maybe there's been a death in the family, some other unusual circumstances, unusual health care expenses, what you want to do is to go to every college that your student is applying to. You say, we reported the income on the FAFSA based on the questions that you asked, but you should be aware that these circumstances have changed, and please take them into account and maybe qualify us for a little bit more financial aid. Now, colleges will look at those types of appeal. They don't always grant them, but they will look at them. So you want to make sure that you do that. And if you do, document it. And the more documentation of dollars and cents that you can provide, the stronger a case you can make. Another thing that comes into play is what you might call negotiation. And this is not the same as buying a car. But if you have competing financial aid offers for a student, and one of them is better than the other, but the student wants to go to the college that didn't offer as much, you might take that offer and say, hey, we really like your college, but we got a much more affordable offer from College X. Is there any way you can evaluate us and consider us for more aid? Once again, it's at the college's discretion as to whether they're going to do that. Some colleges will, some colleges won't, but they usually will take a look at it anyway. And the best way to make your case is to be able to show an award from a college that the other college considers a peer. That way they'll think that, oh, you know, maybe if they're doing this, maybe we did overlook something. Now, because of that approach to negotiating for a better price, using award letters from other colleges to make your case, early decision is often a disadvantage for financial aid. The reason is early decision is a system for admission in which the student says, okay, I'm going to apply to your college early, and if you admit me, and if you offer me enough financial aid to make it affordable for me and my family, I will commit to coming, okay? With early decision, if the college doesn't offer you enough aid to make it affordable, you are released from your obligation to attend. But the reason it's a disadvantage is because you're not going to have competing offers from other colleges that you could potentially show to the college in question to make a case for more aid. Now, you'd always want to ask the college for more before you withdraw your application, but that's why early decision can be kind of a disadvantage, even though it's an advantage for admission, okay? So we said that the FAFSA and the profile are looking at income that was earned in the past. And this is a little chart that hopefully illustrates what's going on. So this is keyed to students who are going to graduate in 2025, so current year students. So they're going to graduate from New Canaan High School in 2025 and enter college in the fall of 2025. So for the FAFSA and the CSS profile, they're going to be looking at income that was earned in 2023, so the year that ended last December. You filed your income taxes April 15th. Your student is probably getting ready to file their applications fairly soon, and you typically would want to file the FAFSA and the CSS profile at about the same time that your student submits applications for admission. That way, when the college notifies the student of whether or not they've been admitted, they can also give you an idea of what financial aid might be available. Now this year, because the rollout of the FAFSA last year was such a disaster, the feds are delaying the release of the FAFSA until December 1st. So it's possible that your student may apply to college before December 1st. In that case, if the college uses the CSS profile, you should probably file the profile early at the same time that the student is applying for admission, and then when the FAFSA becomes available, follow up and file the FAFSA. So that's how income is looked at for the FAFSA and the profile. Assets are valued as of the date that you submit the form. So here, there is a little bit of a strategy that might make you eligible for a little bit more aid. It's probably not going to make the difference between a huge amount, but it might save a little bit. So if, for example, you pay estimated taxes, maybe you're self-employed, or maybe you have income that is irregular that requires you to pay estimated taxes, you might want to pay your estimated taxes a little bit earlier than normal before you file the FAFSA and the CSS profile. That way, that money won't be in your account and it won't be counted in the eligibility for need-based aid. So this is a table that shows all of the dates for current year seniors. So for current year seniors, for the first year of college, they're going to be looking at 2023 income. For the second year, they'll look at 2024. The third year will be 2025, and the fourth year will be 2026. And then the assets will be, again, as of each year when you file the form. Now, this is potentially a way at CSS profile colleges to maybe also think about a little bit of a strategy. So if the student is fortunate enough to have grandparents or other parties who want to help pay for college, what you might notice is that the final income year that's looked at for the FAFSA and the profile is the income year that happens when your student is a sophomore in college. So if you delay those grandparent payments until after January 1st of the student's sophomore year of college, the final income year will have passed. And so it will no longer have an impact on aid at profile colleges as a gift to the student. Now, if your student doesn't qualify for need-based aid, or if your student isn't going to a CSS profile college, you don't need to worry about those timing things. So a lot of the advice that we're talking about really is predicated on whether you're even eligible for need-based aid. And in many cases, you may find that you're not at a given college. So keep that in mind. And the key point here is don't do crazy things to try to qualify for more financial aid that might not be in your overall best financial planning interest. So these are the tables for current year juniors, sophomores, and ninth graders. Okay, so let's say that you have decided or you have found out that your student is likely to qualify for some need-based aid or likely to have some eligibility for need-based aid. What you would like to do in this case then is to find colleges that are likely to meet that aid. So that way you can get a nice aid package that could lower your price. So you want to try to find colleges that meet need. Now, when a student applies using the FAFSA or the profile to a college for financial aid and the student has need, there are three things that the college might do. The college might meet some or all of that need with a grant. That's the best thing. It might meet some of the need with a loan or work study. That's second best. And it might not meet the need at all. It might leave a gap between the amount of need that your student has and the amount of aid that they're offering. That's not so good. So you can look up at this website and get statistics about colleges and how they award financial aid. So at UConn, for example, they meet 43% of need on average with gift aid, and they leave a gap of about 40%. Now, those statistics are not great. UConn doesn't have a fabulous need-based aid program, but UConn is often going to be affordable for Connecticut residents because of their lower starting cost. Penn State, they also don't have a great need-based aid program. And what that means is that if your student is from Connecticut and has need and applies to Penn State, you're probably not going to get a lot of need-based aid from Penn State. What about other colleges? At NYU and Ohio Wesleyan, they meet a greater portion of that need with gift aid, and the amount of the gap is less. And at BU and Bowdoin, they meet even more of the need with gift aid, and they have lower gaps. In fact, Bowdoin is kind of the gold standard of meeting need with gift aid. They meet 97% of need with gift aid, and they don't have any gap. They meet full financial need. So if your student has need, Bowdoin is a great place to look. The challenge, of course, is going to be getting admitted to Bowdoin, but that's not our focus tonight, right? So let's say that you have financial need. You've found some colleges that meet need with good aid. Will that aid make college affordable? So I'm going to show you an example of a very generous college that meets 100% of need. And this college has a starting cost of $72,000, and the EFC in this case is $30,000, which means that there's $42,000 of need. This college is going to meet 100% of that need, and here's how they do it. They meet the first $4,500 of need with a loan. Then they meet the next $2,200 of need with work-study. And only after the loans and the work-study has been subtracted from the amount of need is the remaining need met with gift aid. In this example, that's about $35,000. Now, remember, you're always wanting to focus on the net price. That's the true cost of college. That's the starting cost minus the gift aid. So $72,000 minus $35,000 in gift aid means that the net price at this college is about $37,000, about $7,000 more than the EFC. And this pattern is going to continue in years 2, 3, and 4, where at the end of 4 years, the college has met 100% of need. The cumulative EFC has been $120,000, but the cumulative net price is about $33,000 more than that at $153,000. So here's my rule of thumb. If your EFC times 4 plus about $40,000 for the amount of need that's met in self-help, if that number is not affordable, then need-based aid probably is not going to be the answer to your paying for college problem. So if need-based aid isn't going to solve your paying for college problem, maybe merit aid might do it. So let's talk about that. And to talk about merit aid, we need to think about it in terms of the business of college. So when students and families think about college, they usually focus on the admit rate. That's the percent of students who apply for admission and are offered admission at that college. So at Harvard, 3% of students who apply are offered admission. At Northeastern, it's 6, at BU, it's 11, at Muhlenberg, Ohio Wesleyan, and University of Denver, it's 50% or more. Now, colleges, of course, pay attention to the admit rate, but they also pay a lot of attention to another number, which is the yield rate. The yield rate is the percent of students who were offered admission to attend that college in the spring and who ended up enrolling at the college in the fall. So at Harvard, more than 4 out of 5 students who are offered admission end up going to Harvard. At Claremont McKenna and Northeastern, it's about half. At Muhlenberg, Ohio Wesleyan, and University of Denver, it's 15% or less. So when that yield rate gets into the 20s and lower, colleges really worry about whether they're going to have enough students attending college to pay some part of the tuition that helps to pay the bills at that college and keeps the lights on. So what do? They put themselves on sale with financial aid. It's kind of like a car dealer who has to move the old model year cars out at the end of the year. They put them on sale so they can get new ones. And colleges have a new model year every single year, too, that they've got to fill. So this third column shows the percent of students receiving college-funded gift aid. It might be need-based aid or it might be merit aid, but it's students who are paying less than the full price at that college. And the fourth column shows the percent of students who had no financial need but received merit-based gift aid. So you can see there's no merit aid at Harvard. There's virtually no merit aid at Claremont McKenna or BU, but there's quite a bit of merit aid at Muhlenberg, Ohio Wesleyan, and University of Denver. So that third column, the percent of students who receive college-funded gift aid, is the single best indicator of whether a college uses merit aid in its awarding approach. So we're going to talk about that some more, and I'll show you where to find it. So we said that merit aid is usually called scholarships. It's based on things like grades, class rank, test scores. It's most prevalent at private colleges, but more and more public colleges are using it too. And here's a key point. The highest awards go to the strongest students relative to the other applicants at that college. So what that means is that the students' safety colleges for admission may also be safety colleges for financial aid. And as we saw, college aid policies vary, ranging from colleges that use no merit aid to colleges that use a significant amount of merit aid. So I want to show you some examples of how colleges awarded merit aid, and these are from before the pandemic when SAT scores were more widely used and widely available. And what you can see is that the college's top merit award at these three colleges corresponds quite closely to the 75th percentile SAT score. What that does, the 75th percentile separates the top quarter of applicants from all of the rest. So you can see that the top quarter of applicants at these schools were getting the highest merit awards. And then the merit awards got lower, smaller, as you got toward the 25th percentile, toward the bottom 25% of applicants. So it turns out that you can make a generalization from this observation, which is that if a college uses merit aid, the best chances for the largest awards are when you're above the college's 75th percentile. If a college uses merit aid, the awards may phase out when you get closer to the 25th percentile. But at colleges that compete aggressively for students, they may award merit aid to nearly everyone. So let's look at which colleges award merit aid. And I told you that I thought that this item, this percent of students receiving college-funded gift aid, is the single best indicator of whether a college uses merit aid. You can find it at this College Navigator website, and you can see that at Gettysburg College in Pennsylvania, 95% of students receive college-funded gift aid. That means that only 5% of the students there are paying the full price. At Lewis and Clark College in Portland, Oregon, 100% of the students get college-funded gift aid. No one is paying the full price, right? So when this percentage is over 65 or 70%, it's pretty likely that a college is using at least some merit aid in the way it awards aid. And when it's over 80%, it's highly likely. And if you go on this site, you'll find that there are a lot of colleges in this 90% or more receiving gift aid. So that's a really strong indicator that if your student might be benefited from a merit award, that might be a college where if your student is a strong applicant, they could get a good award. So let's say that you're trying to identify some colleges that might award merit aid. This is an example of a student with an 1100 SAT. Now, SAT scores are not as universal as they used to be. Most colleges have gone test optional now. If there's a silver lining to the pandemic, that's probably it. But it's an easy way to compare across colleges. So even if your student hasn't taken the SAT, what I often do, and your counselors can probably help with this, is do what I call a proxy SAT, something that's sort of consistent. You want to be kind of conservative, but consistent with their transcript overall. So in this case, where the student has an 1180 SAT, at Shenandoah University in Virginia, that 1180 is right in the middle of that SAT range. So that means that this student would probably get a pretty good merit award at Shenandoah. And you can look at other colleges with similar scores and identify other ones that might be candidates to offer your student merit aid. If your student has a 1300 SAT, you're going to be looking at a different range of colleges, but the principle is the same. Another way to find information about merit aid is on what's called the Common Data Set. Now, this is not the most user-friendly thing in the world, but it has a gold mine of data. So if you Google the name of the college that you're interested in and the words Common Data Set, you can often find it. Probably about 3/4 of the time you'll find it. And then you go to Section H, subsection 2A, items N and O. And item N tells you how many students in the first year class got merit aid without having any financial need. This is Hofstra on Long Island. 372, or about 24% of the students, got merit aid there, and the average amount was about $24,000. Hofstra is probably around $75,000 starting cost, so if your student gets an average merit aid, then that would bring it down to about 50. So if 50,000 is your budget, that might be a good place to look. So here are some other examples of merit aid, and I'm going to show you some private colleges first and then some publics. If you're looking for merit aid, BU is probably not the place to look. They give college-funded gift aid to 49% of the students, so 51% are paying the full price. You can see that about 7% of students do get merit aid without having financial need, and the actual amount is quite high. It's about $48,000. My guess is that those are incentive payments to children of students. They might participate in a program where children of faculty get a discount. They're not using it a lot, so it's not a great place if you're looking for merit aid. But if you're looking for a small liberal arts college that's comparable to some of the NESCACs, you might think about Macalester or Dickinson, where 90% or more of those students get merit aid, or Fordham or Worcester in Ohio. So these are places that might give pretty good merit aid to your student depending on what type of schools they're looking for. And at public colleges, it's a little bit harder to guess at public colleges because they're combining in-state students with out-of-state students, but you can get the general drift. At Berkeley, don't plan on any merit aid. In fact, don't plan on any need-based aid. So if your kid wants to go to Berkeley, plan on $75,000 a year. University of Maryland is probably not the best bet, but University of Rhode Island, Arizona State, University of Maine, they all use merit aid for out-of-state students. So here's the punchline. The best chances for merit aid are when a college has a relatively high admit rate, a relatively low yield rate, and a relatively high percent of students receiving college-funded gift aid, and your student is a strong applicant relative to other applicants at the school. So we've talked about need-based aid and merit aid. I'm going to give you kind of a summary. And I've divided colleges into 4 categories that I call the elite, the near elite, the mid-market, and the others. The elite and the near elite tend to be very generous with need-based aid, and they tend not to use very much merit aid. So if you don't have financial need and you're looking for a discount, don't plan on it at Bowdoin or Amherst. On the other hand, the mid-market and other colleges may not have as generous a need-based aid program, but they often use significant amounts of merit aid. And if you look at how many of these colleges there are maybe 100 or 150 in that elite or near elite category. There are about 2,000 in the mid-market and other category. So there are colleges who are dying to give your student an offer of free money to attend their college. The trick is finding them out and applying to them. One way you can find out is to use a net price calculator to estimate your cost at colleges. So a net price calculator is an online tool that's required by law. Every college has to have one. However, they don't have to have good ones. So a net price calculator is, by law, supposed to tell you the starting price, an estimate of the gift aid, and do the arithmetic to subtract the gift aid from the starting price and show you the net price. Here's how you can tell if it's a good one or not. If it is super easy to use, takes 10 or 15 seconds, it's got 5 questions, it probably stinks. If it kind of makes you tear your hair out, if you're asking, oh, why are they asking me this? Why are they asking me that? It's probably asking enough questions to give you a more reliable estimate. And don't get discouraged, because as you use them more and more, you're going to find that they're asking the same types of questions over and over. So as you do it more, you will get better at it. And always remember, the net price is the starting cost, including all 4 of those elements, minus the gift aid. So when you use net price calculators, the thing that that's going to allow you to do is to compare the net price side by side. So you're comparing apples to apples. And here is where I want to remind myself to pause, because we've been talking about dollars and cents all night. And you have to take into account the other considerations of applying to college. Your student wants a certain environment. You want a college where your student will thrive and find the programs that he or she is interested in. So I'm not advocating that you find the cheapest possible college. What I am advocating, though, is that you find a college where you are confident that it's going to be affordable for you and your family and your student, so that at the end of 4 years, you're not overburdened by excessive debt. So this is an example of a B- student with an 1100 SAT and an EFC of 15,000. And you can see at Roger Williams in Rhode Island, the starting cost is 64,000. They say that they'll offer 21,000 in merit aid, an additional 1,000 in need-based aid, for a net price of 42,000. At Shenandoah, the net price is 34. At Wheaton, outside of Boston, it's 30. At UConn, it is about 29. At Bowdoin, it's 17. That's fabulous. That's only 2,000 more than the EFC. And at Western Connecticut, commuting from home while living with your parents, the net price is about 17,000. So let me stop for a minute. I know that living at home with your parents and commuting to Western Connecticut is not the same thing as going away to college and living in the dorm. But the reason that I put that on there is to remind people that there is an affordable path to college for everyone. It may not be the path that you have expected, but it's far better to make some compromises on the cost of 4 years of college than to have the students or the parents overburdened by excessive debt and regretting it for decades after college. The other thing, a B- student is probably not going to be admitted to Bowdoin. So even though that looks like a great price, it's probably not going to work out. So you need to take everything into account when you're doing it. So we've talked about a lot. We're almost to the finish line, but I want to talk about paying the net price. So a lot of people, when they're talking about the cost of college, say, well, what about all these scholarships I hear about, that billions of dollars in scholarships go unclaimed every year? That's a myth. The vast majority of money for college comes directly from colleges themselves in the form of the grants and scholarships that we're talking about tonight. And when I say vast majority, that means 90 to 95% or more. So it certainly makes sense to look for outside scholarships. But in most cases, what you're going to find is that they're $1,000, $2,000. They're probably for 1 year only. So it's a lot better to have $1,000 in your pocket than in the college's pocket. But when you're talking about colleges that might cost $70,000 or $80,000, it's not really solving the big problem. So the answer to how you pay the net price is you pay it from income that is earned over time. What do I mean by that? There are 3 types of income. One of them is prior income, money that was earned in the past and has been saved. The next is current income, money that's earned during the college years and can be used for college expenses during the college years. And then the final one is future income, money that's earned after college and is used to repay the debt you took on to pay for college. That is always the most expensive way to pay. That's where you want to start being careful. So I want to go back to that award letter that we looked at the beginning of the evening. Remember, the net price was about $35,000, and I want to do the arithmetic to see, is this college going to be affordable? So we've got to remember that the cost of college is going to be for 4 years, and there are some really important questions to ask. One of them, how much will costs increase, and is the aid automatically renewable and on what terms? If the college is not crystal clear in explaining how to renew the aid and whether it's renewable, make sure you get an answer to that in writing before you make a commitment to the college. So in this case, I'm going to assume that the costs increase 2% a year, that the aid is renewable and constant for 4 years, that the student has $2,000 in savings and the parents have $25,000. So let's pay for this college. It turns out that inflating the net price for 4 years means the cost of a degree is about $144,000. So how are we going to pay for that? Well, the student can get a work-study job each year during the academic year and make about $2,500. And the student can automatically qualify for federal student loans. Federal student loans are always the first place to look if you're going to borrow for college, because they're automatically available as long as you file the FAFSA. The rates are reasonable for an unsecured loan, and there are protections for the borrower if they run into trouble after college. But there's a limit to how much you can borrow, and the limit is $5,500 in year 1, $6,500 in year 2, and $7,500 each in years 3 and 4. That means that the student, on his or her own, can borrow no more than $27,000 in most cases for college. After this, we're going to use the $2,000 in student savings. Remember that student assets are assessed a little bit more heavily in the formula than parent assets. So let's use these first, and maybe the student will qualify for a little bit more aid in years 2, 3, and 4. Next, the student can get a summer job each year before college, and the student should be able to save at least $2,500 each summer toward tuition. At this point, the student's resources are exhausted, so now we've got to start looking for the parents. And the parents look at their budget and they say, okay, we think we can pay $375 a month out of our ongoing income toward the cost of college. $375 a month is $4,500 per year. Next, we're going to use $18,000 in parent savings, and we have fully paid for year 1. In year 2, we're going to use the remaining $7,000 in parent savings. But at this point, both the student and the parent resources are gone. The only way to pay for additional college is for there to be additional borrowing. And I always consider any borrowing beyond federal student loans to be a parent responsibility, because either the parent is going to need to borrow it in the parent's name, or they're going to need to co-sign for the student. So in a very real sense, that is a parent liability. So in this case, the parents need to borrow $12,000 to fully pay for year 2, $19,000 to pay for year 3, and $20,000 to pay for year 4. So we have fully paid for 4 years at college using prior income, current income, and future income. We ended up with $27,000 in student debt and about $52,000 in parent debt. Is that a good idea? We don't know yet. And the first question we've got to answer is, what will those loans cost? Well, student loans currently carry a 6.5% interest rate, and parent loans are about 9%. And you pay them back over 10 years, beginning 6 months after graduation. In addition, the interest clock starts ticking immediately when those loans are borrowed, and the amount of interest that accumulates during the college years is going to be added to the beginning balance of the loan. So for the student, that's going to be about $4,600 of interest that accumulates. The beginning balance is going to be $31,600. For the parents, it's going to be almost $10,000 of interest. So they're going to end up with about $62,000. So for every $1,000 of student debt, the student is going to have to pay back $136 per year for 10 years. So 31.6 times 136 is $4,315 per year that the student is going to have to pay back. And the parents are going to have to pay back $9,400 a year. So is that reasonable? Well, my rule of thumb for student debt is that the student should not pay more than 10% of his or her income for education loans. That leaves 90% of their income for taxes, rent, and what I call the 3 Gs, gas, groceries, and good times. So if the student borrows that $27,000, that's going to be about $4,300 a year. That means the student needs to get a job that pays about $43,000 a year. And the good news is that new college graduates on average make about $40,000 to $50,000. So in most cases, it's probably not an unreasonable trade-off for the student to take on that $27,000 in debt for the benefit that they get out of a college degree. But it does put some constraints on them. So if they want to work for Greenpeace for $20,000 a year, that might be a problem. For the parents, I see a big red flag, because when we were talking with the parents about their budget, they said they could spend $375 a month or $4,500 a year. My question to them is going to be, if you can afford $4,500 a month or a year during the college years, what makes you think you can afford $9,400 a month after college? So to me, this does not look like an affordable college. And parents, of course, also have to consider their ongoing obligations, retirement, and college for other kids. So at this point, a lot of people say, geez, how does everyone else do it? And they do it exactly the same way we've been talking about tonight. You start with the starting cost, you subtract the gift aid, take it over 4 years, and that's the net price of a college degree. You look at the resources that you have available to pay for college. So the student has $47,000 between federal student loans, a summer job, and work study. The big question is going to be, what do the parents have available to make up any additional budget? And if the resources don't equal the net price of a degree, there are only 2 alternatives. There must be additional borrowing, or you must find a lower cost college. So what I recommend is that everyone identify what I call your zone of affordability. And I think if you make a 3x2 grid, this is an easy way to do it. So you've made a grid with a column for the student and a column for the parents, and you're looking at prior income, current income, and future income. The student starts out with $47,000. If the student has any savings, that will add to the total budget. If the parents have savings, that will add to the budget. But remember to share it among all of your kids. You don't want to spend it all on your oldest kid, or your younger ones are going to be disappointed. And then think about what you can afford out of your ongoing income. And once again, if you're going to have 2 kids in college at the same time, think about whether you're going to need to share that among the 2 kids. But if you add up all of those 5 cells, that's going to give you what I call your zone of affordability, and that's the parent debt-free point. That's the maximum amount you can pay for 4 years of college without taking on parent debt. Then you compare it to the estimated 4-year cost of a degree, and whatever your number is, all of the colleges at that price and below are within your zone of affordability. So this is some pretty heavy stuff. I think it helps to keep things in perspective. College is important, but it's not the goal. The goal is to set your student up for success in life after college in a way that neither the student nor the parents are overburdened by excessive debt. You might think about some people who have been pretty successful in life. So the guy who started Starbucks went to Northern Michigan University. The head of Hershey Foods went to Shippensburg University in Pennsylvania. And the head of Walt Disney Company went to Ithaca College. These are all fine colleges, but they're not the top of the brand heap that you see in U.S. News. Or you might think about how much your student is going to earn after college. So the average mid-career earnings of a Boston College graduate are about $1,000 more than a Loyola University of Maryland graduate. But the difference in the net price is $108,000. So this guy is going to have to work for 108 years to pay off the difference in the net price. So how do you find financial safeties? One way is to do the numbers such as we've been doing tonight. So ask me for the slides. You'll be rocket scientists after this. Another easy way to do it is to just put colleges who automatically have different approaches to how they award aid on your students' list. So an in-state public college is a no-brainer. Everyone should apply to one of those. You might think about an out-of-state public flagship. The out-of-state secondary systems are often way less expensive. If your student has high financial need, a highly selective private college might be a good choice. And if your student needs merit aid, there's a group called the Colleges That Change Lives, and those colleges often use quite a bit of merit aid. And remember, if the budget is really constrained, commuting to college is always an option to get a degree without taking on excessive debt. So I want to thank you all. I've got a website that has some resources if you want to check it out. Be happy to send the slides to everyone. We have some time for questions, but I think we have someone from the New Canaan Community Foundation who is able to tell you about some scholarship opportunities that are available locally. And local scholarships are often the best ones to apply for, so. Sorry, I didn't give you much.
No, you're good. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I will be super brief, I promise. I know it's a little bit late and it was a really engaging presentation. I'm sure there are a lot of questions. My name is Meg Soffin. I am the program officer at the New Canaan Community Foundation, and I'm here today to talk about the Sapienza Scholarship. The Sapienza Scholarship was started at the Community Foundation back in 2007 at the bequest of Anne and Anthony Sapienza, who wanted to make sure that all students in their community in New Canaan could access higher education. So this scholarship is based almost entirely on financial need. So two kind of eligibility criteria. One is financial need, and the other is living in New Canaan. I believe that this is exactly the forum that we want to be at to make sure we're reaching all of the people who fall into those categories. We judge financial need based off of the Student Aid Index, which is the new version of the EFC, the Estimated Family Contribution on the FAFSA form, and the institutional methodology on the CSS form, if your student chooses to fill that out. The higher those numbers are, the more aid that we are able to, or I'm sorry, the lower those numbers are, the more aid that we're able to offer to your student. As long as you hit those 2 points, the New Canaan residency and exhibiting some form of financial need, you are completely eligible to apply. And I just want to review some highlights about the scholarship so you're aware when it opens up in January. First is that the review is done completely anonymously by a panel of volunteer reviewers who are just passionate about the success of all of the applicants that we sort through every year. The second is that we make the application extremely accessible. We require a letter of recommendation, but it can be one that your student has already gotten for their college application. We require an essay. It can be one that your student already wrote for their college application. So we hope that it doesn't put up any barriers. The second is the range of awards associated with the scholarship is around $2,000 to around $10,000. Last year we awarded over $170,000 to I think around 33 students. So $4,500, $5,000 a student is where we average out. The third, and this is particularly unique to, as we were talking about, is that the Sapienza Scholarship is dedicated to continuing funding students throughout the tenure of their education. As long as your student continues to live in New Canaan, which again is an eligibility requirement, and they continue to exhibit a similar amount of financial need, internally, we say unless they hit the lottery, we will continue funding that student at the same amount every single year. And then the fourth thing that I wanted to review is because the Sapienza Scholarship kind of provides the infrastructure, the backbone, if you will, a couple of local organizations have decided to kind of piggyback off of our process. So by applying for the Sapienza Scholarship and by being eligible for the Sapienza Scholarship, your student can also apply to 2 other scholarships. The first is the Silver Hill Scholarship. So if you have a student who is studying healthcare, they will be able to apply for that. The second is the Joseph F. Dorico Rotary Award, which is put in place by the local, the Rotary Club of New Canaan. And that's for students who have a history of volunteerism and involvement in the community. So if either of those 2 things sound like your student, they'll also be able to apply for those scholarships. Silver Hill is $2,000 a year, and just like the Sapienza Scholarship follows your student through. And then Dorico Rotary is around $5,000 a year. It varies by year, and they only have 1 a year, so I personally haven't seen the same student get it twice, but there's always hope. And I think that is it on the Sapienza Scholarship. If you have any deeper questions, again, my name is Meg Soffin. I'm from the New Canaan Community Foundation. My contact information can be found on the website, and I will be hanging out afterwards with some business cards if it's of interest. But thank you so much. Appreciate the chance.
Great, thanks. So let's see if we answered all of your questions.
Are 529 funds treated in any special way, or are they simply considered assets when colleges look at need-based?
So the question is whether 529 funds are treated in a special way. So 529 funds are a little bit of a unique thing. They have a beneficiary and they have an owner. Usually, if the parents set up the 529 account, the parents are the owners and the student is the beneficiary. So the FAFSA will look at 529s that are owned by the parents, and it will count those as a regular asset, so a maximum of 5.64%. The profile will look at 529s where the parent is an owner and the student or any sibling is the beneficiary. And once again, they count as a regular asset, 5%. Usually, as I said, assets don't make as much of an impact as income does. And if the 529 is owned by a grandparent, it doesn't count on the financial aid form, so it's not reported. However, when the funds are expended, then that counts as income to the student. And that's when you want to do it after January 1st of the student's sophomore year, if the student might qualify for need-based aid at a profile school. Yes?
How does the profile treat illiquid assets? Like, let's say you own a bunch of raw land. Does anything is pay property taxes and it's a good chunk of change? How does the profile treat that in terms of?
Yeah, so the question is, how does the profile look at illiquid assets? And an example might be raw land. And the answer is that they expect to look at it exactly the same as any other asset that's owned. So ideally, they want to look at the market value less any debt that's securing that asset. In reality, that can be pretty tricky. I've worked with a lot of people who have raw land, and you usually can't find it on Zillow or something like that. So what you want to do in that case is document what I call the straight face test. So if you have, 2 acres in the Adirondacks or something like that, then think about what 2 acres might go for and use that number. But that's how the profile will look at that. Yes? So the question is, if a student joins the military, will it be an advantage? And the first thing I have to say is that I'm not an expert on military benefits, so I'll tell you the little bit that I know. there are a lot of benefits that are available to veterans of the military. Usually, to get in my experience, to get the best benefits, you have to be a veteran, which means that you're probably going to be going to college a little bit later than someone else might. But if you are a veteran and have those benefits available, it can be a huge benefit for college. Other types of military applications are the military academies or ROTC programs, and those I really can't give you as much information on, so you'll need to research those.
That bucket of loans that was forgiven last year, the $25 billion, if they repeat that, what group of loans were those that we want that would be forgiven?
So the question is about loan forgiveness. So loan forgiveness is kind of it's not as valuable as you might think. So most of the loans that were forgiven under what's called the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. And that program requires people to have worked for 10 years, making payments throughout those 10 years while employed by either a nonprofit or government entity. This program is still available, by the way. But for most students, the amount of debt that they take on in college probably is not going to qualify for much public service loan forgiveness, because if they're making a decent salary and making payments for 10 years, it's likely that they will have paid off most or all of those loans. So most of those big forgiveness loans were from people who had incurred debt in graduate school.
Where should we get started then? Like, where do we go to a website to start filling this out so we're in compliance with what we need to apply for?
So probably what you want to do is to let it be driven by the colleges that your student applies to. So when your student is applying for admission at a college, you check the financial aid web pages at that college, and they will tell you how to qualify for financial aid. So you're going to need to file the FAFSA, and you can go to fafsa.gov to get information about that, or studentaid.gov for information about federal student aid. And then if they go to a CSS profile school, you'll also do that. That goes through the College Board. But each school will have links on its website to direct you to the places to apply. Doing all of the research and learning all of the ins and outs of it, there's a little bit more to that. That just takes a lot of work. Great. Well, I appreciate everyone who has come out tonight, and I always forget to ask where your students are in the process, but wherever they are, I wish you all the best of luck with it, and good luck for a good school year, too.